Hello and welcome to everyone. I'm Lisa. Thanks for joining me here on the Whimsy Stamps channel for another technique tutorial. In this video, I'm sharing how to use a rechargeable airbrush to create an eerie night sky. Now, you might have seen me use this airbrush in the past here on the channel. At the end of the video, I'll have a link to another video that goes into full detail about the system I'm using. Toward the end of this video, I have two cards to share with you that demonstrate that by simply changing the colors, you can achieve different looks with this technique. It's so exciting to share this, so let's get started. For this, I'm using 110-pound cover stock. Since I'm layering inks, I want it to stand up to this without warping or buckling. Now, I cut on the 4-inch mark to create a panel. Hang on to that 7 by 8.5-inch piece. You can score that later for your card base. Off screen, I ran a piece of masking paper through my die cutting machine with a round die. Here you can see that I didn't cut out the entire circle. If that's something you want, you most certainly can do that. Now, you can use any round die you have available, but if it has stitching, it will show up. Now, while it can be a cute detail, I prefer a straight line over that stitching showing. So I'm going to center the masking paper on the 4-inch panel, and if it's not perfect, that's okay because you'll need to trim this panel down to fit on your card base. I recommend that you work in a well-ventilated area and use an old box to protect your workspace. Now, as you can see here, this is just an old kit box I've repurposed for airbrushing. I would suggest that you hold on to those kit boxes because they are perfect for inky techniques. Now I've grabbed some Copic refills, V01, 04, 06, 09, and N9. You don't have to use Copic alcohol ink. You can use any alcohol ink you have available for this technique. I'm going to start out by putting a few drops of my lightest ink, V01, into the cup on the airbrush. I am going to test it out to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly out of the brush. So I grab a scrap piece of paper and just spray it to make sure that it's flowing the way I want it, and it's perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my panel back in my box, and we're going to start to spray this. I'm trying to leave a little bit of room between the edge of the masking paper and where I'm spraying. So maybe like 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Leave yourself a little bit of white space around the moon there. And we're to create this glowing look. So I just work my way back and forth around the moon with that V01. Now you can see I had a little bit of sputter come from the airbrush. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Keep going because we're layering these inks on top of each other. You're not going to be able to see that. So I've laid down V01. And then I've come in with V04, and the darker the ink gets, the farther away from that moon I stay. I keep away from the masking paper when I have that darker ink. Now, right along the very bottom of the panel, you're going to see me come in and darken that up because that's going to be like a landscape area, and we're going to stamp over that shortly. So continuing to add the colors, I've come in with the 01, 04, and 06, and now we're hitting this up with 09, V09. And you can see how it's starting to build that darkness. And then we're going to work our way back down through those colors just to smooth everything out. Now, once you're happy with the way that the violet colors look on your paper or whatever color you're working with, because maybe you're using greens or pinks, you can use any color you want with this. Once you're happy with the way it looks, that's when you want to come in with your darkest color. And I recommend like an N8 or an N9. So I'm going to go ahead and start laying down N9, and I'm going to keep that along the very outer edges of my panel. But that N9 makes all the difference in the world when creating this background. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the masking paper. I want you to see what it looks like at this point. You can use it as is. You can stop at this point and go ahead and move into stamping all of your elements on here to give it that creeped out factor, or we can take it up a notch with our airbrush and some white ink. So I have the Pinata white ink in a small bottle there in my hand, and it has a fine tip on it. It just makes it easier to put it into the airbrush. I'm shaking it up. I'm going to go ahead and add some into the airbrush. Now there's still ink in my airbrush. And when I use this technique, I like to go ahead and spray some of that ink out with the white ink. So you're going to see me spray some of this out onto a scrap piece of paper. And it just helps to take some of that darkness away from it. We want some of that color there, but not quite this much. Now, once we spray this through, I'll add a little bit more of that white ink in, and I'm going to show you how to start to create this really cool, hazy, foggy effect. We're going to go around the moon with the white ink, and then we're even going to create some hazy looking clouds over our moon. It's so simple with the airbrush. Now you can skip this step completely because maybe you're not creating that eerie nighttime sky and you don't want it to look like the fog is rolling in. So you can totally skip this step and just move on to stamping your elements that you're going to use. But for me, on this panel, I wanted it to look really spooky and eerie. So along the bottom edge, I sprayed some white to make it look like that fog is rolling in. And that was our finished panel there. So you need to give this panel some dry time before you move into stamping. So here I have the Wildflowers and Grass stamp set and the Seasonal Trees from Whimsy Stamps. We're using both of these sets to create some fun elements to the spooky background. I'm using the tree here on the right from the Seasonal Trees. It has that spooky, eerie vibe to it to me. And I'm going to just stamp these off to the edge of my moon with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now, I just went ahead on my first tree and I stamped that down a little bit lower on my panel so that the bottom half of the trunk is hanging down and it's not going to be seen. When we move into stamping it again, we're going to raise that second one up so it looks like there's some difference in between the height of the trees. We're going to do this on both sides of our panel. Once we have the trees stamped, we'll come in with the grass line from the Wildflowers and Grass stamp set, and we're going to use that to create some landscape along the bottom of the trees. And I'm just stamping both sides again with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is so easy to do. Now, once you have the grass stamped, that's it. You're done with your background. Set it aside and let it completely dry while you work on whatever element you want to add to your card. Here are the samples that I promised. I skipped the eerie nighttime sky on this card and went with an autumn sunset and created a spooky field for my Halloween Scarecrow. He is absolutely amazing. Now, what I did, I cut him out of white cardstock and colored him with my Copic markers to create that extra creepiness about him. I love him. He's so cool. So again, just changing up the colors with your airbrushing, you can create a completely different scene. And while I love this guy, these little guys are amazing. I love the Trick or Treat Kids stamp set from Whimsy. It is a must-have in my opinion. These guys are the cutest Trick or Treat kids I've seen. So I just used the purples on this one with black. I basically did the same thing other than I added some white splatters to this. And then of course I die cut a few black bats and added those on the moon. And I added some moonstone sequins to this as well, just to give a little bit of shine when the light hits the card just right. It's going to bounce a little bit of light off of those sequins and just give it a fun little touch. So that's going to wrap us up for this technique tutorial. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I really do appreciate you guys for sticking with me throughout the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. Until next time, you guys, please take care.